Hello, guys. Welcome to the very first episode of the Way podcast. My name is Sajid Merwar, and on this podcast, we kind of just talk about anything, really. That's why it has such a vague and um, non specific name. I got the idea for the podcast when I read The Book of Five Rings by Miyamoto Musashi, and he talks about the way, keeping on your path and all that. His way was a way of a samurai, but he also talked about to know your own way and to achieve it at the highest level, we need to look at other people's ways of life, like the way of a carpenter to the way of a general of an army. And this allows us to have a different perspective on things and really broaden our horizons. On that note, today we will be talking about the way of an artist. And as a guest, I have brought on a good friend of mine. He is an aspiring artist. We've worked together before. We hang out a lot. His name is Charles Cao. And go ahead, introduce yourself.
Hey, my name is Charles Cao, and you can find me on Twitter, Alnisaboshi. But yeah, I mainly just do digital art and also sometimes traditional art. Thanks for having me on today.
No problem, man. It's always great to, meet up and talk, especially about, something a little bit more serious than other times we've met up.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. So the first question I have here is just what it's kind of a general question. What is the way of an artist? What do you think? What does that mean to you, being an artist?
For me, being an artist, for one thing, like to be an artist, to pursue that as like a career, I feel like there has to be some sort of like background that like you have, right?
Mm-hmm.
For me, just mostly I want to express what I have in my personal like world, what's in my heart through like the medium art. Because art is sort of like the only universal language we really have, right? I think anyone from any culture can appreciate art, and all art forms are connected.
Yeah, I totally agree. Um, Art acts almost like it's like the medium for so many different things. Like you yourself, you're a visual artist. And you're not just a visual artist. You actually, you do other forms like literature. You've been writing, and yeah, it's just such a beautiful medium to connect with people and share your emotions, rather, um, or in a way that can be understood by almost anyone, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, again, they're just like it goes back to just like for me, I want to create like a world. I want other people to experience what I kind of have, right?
Yeah, talk a little
Um,
bit more about that, actually.
yeah. So I mentioned previously, like being an artist kind of relates to how you grew up in a way, how you were raised.
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't like the most like extroverted person when growing up, and I didn't like make friends the same way that most people did. So in a lot of ways, like I really found myself like isolated. But through art and through like expressing my characters, like building a world that people can like indulge in, I started making new friends. Like that's how I met like one of my best friends, and how I started making friends in Chinese elementary school back when I was like around 8. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. I can understand that. I guess perspective as someone who was also quite shy when they were younger, and
Mm-hmm.
use some sort of thing to help relate with people. Or like when I went to, I mean, when I was younger, I wasn't really into different art forms as much. But when I was in like I'd say middle school, grade 7, 8, I met a lot of my friends through music,
Mm-hmm.
and it was just really nice. One of the best feelings is just playing with someone, right? And you
Mm-hmm.
connect on a different level that you can't really describe. It's like you're emotionally connected without having to say anything,
Yeah.
and it's just it's just a great experience. Just especially in high school when I would, I'd go at lunch and I would just jam out every once in a while with some of my friends in the music program. Even I met um, the other members of our friend group and you through just hanging out and talking about different like media and different forms of art. Like we're both big fans of anime and manga
Grew
and
up with video
music.
games.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's how we.
And
Yeah,
mhm.
yeah. Go
and
ahead.
yeah, just like the medium art really has the power to connect people. Like for example, let's just give an example like anime. Like
Hmm.
there's so many like variation, but like through those anime we connect to each other, even though like we're really different people, right? And that's like why I sort of like decide to pursue this path. Because I feel like even though like people criticize like overconsumption of media nowadays,
Yeah.
media has really held up like the mental health of many youngsters and even older like generations, right?
Yeah, I guess we can move on to and more specifically talking about anime because
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's one medium that has it's produced in such a small country of Japan that
Mm-hmm.
is very densely populated, but really has kept to themselves as a country for a long time. And only recently have has their media been expanding to other parts of the world. Really, like in the last 20 years, you see how Japan has really skyrocketed to pop. I mean, it's become part of pop culture now.
Mm-hmm.
Like I remember when I was younger, people if you watch anime, you were weird. Like, oh,
Yeah,
you watch
it's
anime.
oh, you watch Naruto? What a loser.
I know.
Yeah. But yeah, like I feel like it's really just the past 5 years, like anime has really became mainstream in a way. I mean, it's still not like as mainstream as something like Marvel, but we're
Yeah.
getting close to there.
Yeah, and I think it's amazing that, like we're in North America and, I mean, you speak Japanese and you can write and read and write, but even for me, like you watch and it's a different culture, but we you can still connect to it on a different level. Like there's some things in anime that I cannot feel from other things.
Hmm.
Like certain things that invoke emotion, things like inspiration from watching an anime, like especially for me it's sports animes and even like those slice of life genres that or those slice of life shows that show somebody like just in high school, something that we can relate to. We were previously in high school only a few years ago and
Hmm.
trying to decide their life. Like, what are they going to do with their life? Do they want to pursue their dreams? Do they want to have the easy life, or not an easy life, but a safe life? And
Hmm.
it really is motivating as someone, I posted like I released my first song last year and now I'm slowly releasing more and more music. That's something I always wanted to do, but I never just took the leap, right? I
Hmm.
don't know if I'm going to do it as a career, but it really feeds my creativity and I guess artistry in a way, and it feels good.
Hmm. Yeah. Um. Yeah. I feel like for me, like anime is a bit different from other media because just like it's more raw in terms
Mm-hmm.
of like its presentation. Because most things are adapted from like light novels and like mangas, and they're usually written by like single person.
Yeah.
So I think that's why like we form a special sort of connection to them, like especially when we're like in our younger years, like teenage and like even young adulthood.
Yeah, for sure. Um, it's just that skill. It's really a skill, and it's something that I don't think is admired as much as it really like. I mean, they don't make much money unless you're at the top in any art form, in any of the fine arts, right? If
Mm-hmm.
it, unless you're at the top level, you're not making the same amount as um, any accountant or whatever. I'm not shaming any of these jobs, right? They're needed,
Mm-hmm.
and it's okay if you have these jobs, and we they still have value, but they make great money. They're important to everyday life. But think about music. Where would the world be without artists?
Mhm.
Think about how many people listen to music all day. I listen. I like even myself as a musician. I talk to people and they're like, I listen to music like all the time. Like it's always on, just in the background. That just gets me comfortable. I listen to it when I study. I listen to it when I work out or whatever. It's just something that's always there, and it's important to every part of the world, right? Every part of the world has art, and music is integral to the human experience, right?
Mhm.
And I say,
Um,
yeah,
yeah, I agree with that. It says like cultures are just built on art forms, like traditional art, like fine arts, material arts, and then like music and stuff like that, right? Yeah, like what you said, right? I think accounting and any like economic jobs are really important, but like for me, the reason why I chose the so-called dumb job, the dumb path,
of
is
course.
for in many ways like you never really do art for money. Like if you have that mindset, you're not gonna make it big or like even like get actual fans. You
Mm.
do it because you want to be fulfilled yourself. I think that's what I personally think about like the weight of art in a way.
Yeah, for sure. Like I'm glad. Honestly, I think now is the best time to be an artist. I feel like people are getting more and more. It's still difficult. It's very difficult to be just an artist. You know,
Mhm.
it's always something like okay, somebody's passion, but they do it on the side instead of having their main thing, it being their main thing. But now there's a lot more programs. Like for example, this podcast. It's so easy to start a podcast now.
Mhm.
All you do is you get a decent mic. You go on an app like Anchor, the one that I'm gonna use for that I'm using right now to upload this and host this. It's all for free, and they help you
Mhm.
get sponsorships, and it really helps you to connect with people on a different level. There's a reason the whole media used to be like maybe 5 6 years ago geared towards the very short content under 5 minutes, even on YouTube, your videos under 5 minutes. But now then it started getting to 10 minutes, that threshold that they have to
Mhm.
reach to get ads. They're trying to encourage people to watch longer and for people to make longer videos. And now we've kind of bounced back to the long form content, like the long form interviews used to have on TV back in the 80s and 90s and even before that.
Mhm.
And and it's really the best, like we could just chat about it's like talking with your close friends, and even if you don't know people, like I can really connect with podcasters because you just hear someone's story in a more casual context versus on TV where it's all fake, really. Like
Mhm.
you have to cater towards what the network wants, and they're still big, but it's kind of dying out, the whole Hollywood, um I guess, idea that you have to go there to make it,
Mhm.
and you can do it yourself more, especially for artists. It's really good.
Yeah. The way that like media has like the accessibility has blossomed really did help like artists, especially like nowadays more and more artists can go like freelance, like more and more like people can do podcasts to like really showcase their personalities. And what you mentioned about Hollywood and like the current state of like Western media, just yeah, it's very stagnant because like it's still very formulaic and they're just doing the same things. Like
Mm-hmm.
they're not really following the trends of like the new generation, you know?
Yeah, and I'm kind of glad that it's become more and more like this, where it's like if I want to listen to a comedian, like I don't always want to watch his set or her set on TV or whatever, right? The
Mm-hmm.
edited down cut on late night television with no bad words and no things that are not politically correct or whatever, right? No jokes
Mm-hmm.
about like things that people can't say on TV, right? I want to hear like the real side of it,
Mm-hmm.
you know the raw, as you said, like the raw emotion from it. Like a lot of these, one thing I find very interesting about podcasts is that you can hear the backstory of these really funny people. Like you'll be dying laughing half the time, and they tell
Mm-hmm.
you their story is so tragic. Like there's so many podcasters, like for example this podcaster Bobby Lee, very famous comedian in the states and all around the world. at this point. He has a podcast called Tiger Belly,
Mm,
and I always do him for his like hilarious stand up. And I went on there for like what they started listening to podcasts like 3 4 years ago, and he would talk about his dad used to beat him like crazy. He had to reconcile with drug addiction, alcohol addiction. He's gone sober, relapsed, all these sorts of things. And he can still
mm,
joke about it and talk about it. A lot of people who have these sorts of very difficult parts of their lives are some of the funniest people out there, ironically, right? Because it's the
mm,
best way, as they say, laughter is the best medicine. And without this medium, we wouldn't be able to hear that. Like you're
mm.
not going to hear that on a radio like on a radio show.
Yeah, because for radio shows that's not profitable. Like
Yeah,
yeah, because everyone wants to be positive on those shows. But like having true raw like stories like that really brings out the humanity that like modern media like it's missing. Mhm. So I think podcast is a great like form of just media in general. Like I'm glad that it's come more like mainstream and people can actually access it.
exactly. Like whoever is listening to this podcast right now, I really appreciate no matter how little um how many people listen to this, how little the amount may be. I'm just glad somebody's listening to this conversation, hearing us talk about things we're passionate about. And yeah, I have also another topic I want to talk about, more specific to the market in Japan.
Mhm.
Um, um, as you are an aspiring visual artist and you're very interested, in the Japanese media, like anime and manga and all that.
Mhm.
How do you feel about the industry in there in Japan? Could you speak a little bit more on that?
Um, I think one thing that like always get criticized about Japanese like industry, like I actually agree with this, but one main thing just like the pay really is like very bad for
Yeah,
the work that artists like put in. I think that's like my main like complaint about like the Japanese industry. Just like in general, like artists are not really getting what they deserve compared to the West. However, the best thing about Japanese like media, just like the freedom they usually allow you to, have. Like, for example, if I publish a comic or a manga out in the West that has like more darker subjects, like for example, racial discrimination, genocide, and stuff like that, you're not gonna get published. You're not the publisher's gonna shut the door on you immediately, right?
yeah,
But in Japan, if you want to tell those stories, if you have like a good conscience, or just like want to explain a sort of a moral, you can get published.
yeah,
Because a quick code, just like if your manga's interesting, then it will get published, right? But like out here in the West, it's just like for the longest time, like they only allow like writers to write heroes' journeys. That's pretty screwed up, right? But yeah, that's just one big thing that really attracted me to the Japanese industry.
yeah,
And also, I'm very fortunate with like my family and how they can actually support me in pursuing this dream. But yeah, it's gonna be a hard path, and that basically just defines the Japanese industry. Like, in order to get into it, you have to be very passionate about
of
what you're
course.
doing.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
So yeah.
It seems like it's the same problem that we were talking about. Artists not working very hard, not getting paid adequate
Mhm.
amount. And I think that's true what you said about the freedom in media, especially maybe not in terms of in general. Like in movies, they'll be able to talk about this kind of stuff, and
Mhm.
maybe in books, but in that specific media of like graphic novels, comic books, as what we would call them here in North America,
Mhm.
versus we would call them manga in Japan. But like that medium, I'm sure there's lots of gatekeeping because publishers are just like people in the music industry. Record, you have to make a record deal to get big, right? To get
Mhm.
out there. Same thing to get on TV. You got to have a you have to have a good agent, a good manager. You have to go to all these big um, corporations. I'm not bashing corporations, right? Uh, I think it's important, an important part of modern society, but they still, it's very difficult still. The gatekeep, and sometimes it's not always like objective, right? Sometimes it
Mm,
is it is very, especially with art, right? Because art can be anything. It is very
mm.
subjective based on the person's opinion, and like I wonder if you have any experience with that as as an artist. I'm sure there's been people who have criticized what you've done or what you plan on doing.
Um, well, for me, like, I guess, like, at least for me, like, my biggest critic is always be myself. But,
Yeah,
yeah, a lot of people have criticized the way, like, especially like the path I'm taking. Um, since I'm planning to actually go pursue art in Japan, which is not very popular, especially out here.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, I don't know. Like I went to art high school, and like my teachers have also criticized the way I do art as well. But I feel like criticism is always good for art, because it leads you to improve yourself. But sometimes, yeah, you do have to, keep your own way,
yeah. There's
set
always
your
a
own
fine
path.
line. Yeah,
Mhm.
there's a fine line between constructive and destructive criticism,
Mhm.
and there's a lot. I try my best as I'm sure you do, because you can't get anywhere without taking some sort of criticism, right? That's how you get
Mhm.
better at anything. Um, it's important to be able. It's hard to recognize, but you should try your best, I think, to recognize whether it's constructive or destructive. If someone's criticizing something that can, like some sort of technical aspect, or
Mhm.
like for example, oh, if it was for one of my pieces, they'd say, oh, like I kind of don't hear the drum section, the percussion in this as much. I feel like it'd be better if it was louder. That's just how I feel. Like that's
Yeah,
some form.
those.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's a form of
So,
constructive criticism, right?
mhm.
Versus someone saying, um, I just don't like this. Like I don't just feel anything. Like it's just not my thing. I think your song is bad. And if they don't
Mhm.
provide any reasoning, that's the easy way to tell that it's. Sometimes people are just being really honest. Sometimes people are just being mean and bitter. But you just got to
Um,
deal with it, right?
I don't like you very much, so I hate your song too.
Yeah, I hate. I listen. I like Drake better than your song. You don't have lyrics in your music, so I don't like you.
Yeah, that's actually one thing like I encounter, especially in our schools down here. Just like, because they usually have a perception of like, hey, if you're a style leans towards like Eastern like art style, so like you're formulaic, you're uncreative, they all look the same, their stories suck. But like we all know that's not very true,
Of
especially
course,
nowadays, right? But yeah, it's always good to find what like constructive criticism is and what's not constructive criticism. And yeah,
yeah,
and I feel like even though like we all have our own egos, like sometimes
of
we can be
course,
very sensitive.
Especially artists.
Yeah. But listening to criticism is always good, I feel.
Yeah, I mean, and especially in the industry, I'm not
Mhm.
involved in it as you are. In like you're actually going into it. I'm just doing music on the side as a passion of mine. But
Mhm.
that's when you really face it. I heard stories of people. My uncle. He's a real estate agent, but he also does acting on the side. And it's
Right.
so difficult. Like he's like now he's getting jobs, right? Just because
Mhm.
they need more representation, cultural representation in media, because it's popular now, right? And that's a whole other topic in itself, talking about the representation in media and whether it's a good or a bad thing. Ultimately, it'll be a good thing at the end of the day, but the reasoning why it's being done is a little
Yeah. The
iffy.
reason why just like commercial, right?
Yeah, I mean
It's
that's what that's the way it's going to be, right? As long if it
mm,
affects their pocketbooks, they're gonna do something about it, and at least it's doing something, right?
right.
But it should. I think we shouldn't lose that meritocracy over pure
Mhm.
diversity, right? Like we should always try to choose the best candidate, but if it comes down to just a matter of, oh, we're just choosing this guy because he's Chinese and we're gonna put him in here because we need another Chinese person, not because he's actually good. Oh, and he's also Chinese because that brings a different perspective. We don't want somebody to
Yeah.
just come on just because of their race or their ethnicity. And that almost devalues them, in my opinion.
I agree.
It's got to
It's
be a mix
more
of both.
like, for example, it's more offensive to like put a Chinese person in a movie about the French Revolution than not having a Chinese person, right?
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
why are they there?
Yeah, it has to make sense, like
Mm,
I mean, it's like every Disney movie now I see there's like one of every ethnicity in every single movie, which is good, but it's just funny. It's
yeah.
very ironic that Disney does that. If you look at what they've done with Mulan,
Mm,
yeah, that was a dumpster fire of a movie, but we're not talking about movies today.
yeah. Just it's strange. Like I'm centralist, but I also link the words to liberal ideals.
Hmm.
But the liberalization of media isn't great, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because even though let's say the right, the conservative right, some of their like beliefs are really really fucked up.
Yeah.
Especially like since I'm a colored person.
Yeah.
But the restriction on media, I feel, is more fucked up because you're basically infringing the right of freedom of speech.
Yeah, and as long, it's very the problem is nowadays, corporations can choose to do whatever they want, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's their space. But I feel like, these things like Facebook, YouTube, Google in general, they're catering to one audience, people who are far to one side or far to the other side,
Mm-hmm.
and they're just feeding that fire because it gets people staying on their platform and all that, and it's good for they can make more money that way, and they'll
Yeah.
silence, certain people. Honestly, now it's even begun off of that, like people are going away from these huge platforms like YouTube, and they're creating things like Patreon and all these subscriptions where it allows for a lot more freedom, where there's already a wall, like if you don't want to hear these things, you don't watch it, if
Mm-hmm.
you, and it's a fine line. It's very difficult to you can't just say, oh, it's one way, it's this way, but we should at least be able to have a discussion about it and let somebody make a mistake and us correct it, if you really want someone to,
Mm.
um I guess, change,
Yeah. Because I feel like, especially in a modern world, we should pride ourselves in individuality instead of like cutting out individuality.
yeah.
But yeah, it's a very like it's a very hard line to really define. But yeah, it'll take some time.
Yeah. And yeah, why don't we start? Why don't we move on to a different topic here? Let's talk about. I guess I could start talking about maybe my perspective on these
Mhm.
sorts of things, like for a little information on music. And since you talked about the industry in Japan,
Mhm.
the music industry now is in a very interesting phase, right?
Mhm.
Because streaming platforms have been the most used to listen to people's music, like Spotify, Apple Music, all these sorts of things. And that's only happened in like the last maybe what 10 years max, probably five, right?
Mhm.
And before people were, they go on sites, they go on iTunes, and they try to like find some way to download music for free and all these sorts of things, right?
Mhm.
And before that you had to buy expensive CDs, and then before that you had to buy expensive records, and it's really changed the ability for access.
Yeah.
In one way, it's great. It's it's like your customer, for example, if you look at it in a business sense, your customer can access your um, your art or your product essentially from anywhere in the world
Mhm.
at any time, and they can listen to it as many times as they want. But on the other side, there's the problem of how much they pay the streams per streams, right?
Mhm.
And it's very low. Like Spotify pays about half a cent, I think, maybe even less,
Mhm.
per stream. And most people don't make their money off streaming. Even the biggest artists in the world, like Anderson Paak, um, like Kendrick Lamar, all these huge names, they don't make their money off streams. Really, like they'll get millions and millions of streams, but it's not the way they're making their millions. They're making their millions from touring, doing live gigs, and all that sort of stuff. That's how
Endorsements.
yeah,
Yeah.
endorsements, and that's
Mhm.
how they're really making their money. And really, Spotify, it's great that they allow, like, we can just distribute to any platform we want now with like so many different, like, DistroKid, TuneCore, CD
Mhm.
Baby, so many of these things. You can just go online, pay $10 a year or whatever the plan is, separate different kind of plans, and you can release your music anywhere in the world on
Mhm.
any platform. But there's always give and take, right? Whenever you do things, is it going to lead to it'll lead to more people having it, but you'll make less money per purchase, right? So then you need
Mhm.
to get more and more people to consume the product. It's like argument of producing a cheap product and selling a lot, or producing an expensive product and selling just a little bit,
Mhm.
right? Not saying the product itself, like the music, is getting worse. Of course, it's still amazing. Music is great, but it's kind of that concept of how we're gonna go about reaching our
Audiences.
consumer.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. We're still like, I just feel like we're still like in the weird situation with just like digital art and like digital music, right?
yeah,
Because we saw just in the past decade, we saw a surge like, SoundCloud rappers,
yeah,
dependent like digital artists, and like like a lot of them became super super successful. Like a lot of us right now are still wondering like how are we supposed to like make money off our like digital art, right?
yeah,
And like there's a new concept I was interested through just like recently, the NFTs, right?
yeah.
Um I personally I don't really believe in NFTs, but I feel like it is an interesting concept of like how can we like sort of like make money like how like traditional artists used to as individual freelance artists.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And one thing I would, recommend to, I mean, I'm very, very new to this game, like we both are really. Like we're
Mhm.
just getting started into it. We're both young. But,
Mhm.
one thing I would always say is, as someone who is in business and studying business right now, um, I would say always have some sort of take a not just an artistic approach. You have to have some sort of business minded approach, and that doesn't mean um, it doesn't mean taking like a corporate approach where you have to, like, in air quotes, obviously, right? You don't have to dumb it down or try to commercialize it to just limit your art. You have to take an approach of, I am selling myself, really. I'm
Mhm.
selling my work, which is me. It comes directly from me or whoever's collaborating on one project to the consumer. There's no middleman. There's nobody cares about the publisher, really.
Mhm.
They care about the artist's name on this piece of art, this book, this manga, this anime, this song, right? So
Mhm.
should always remember to represent yourself as you're almost like a brand yourself. You are your own
Mhm.
business. Every single person, every single artist is their own business. You're always self-employed, right? Even gigging musicians, they have to look for things themselves, right? Or they have a manager that helps find them, or an agent that helps find them gigs as an actor, would. So I would say you should always look to take that approach because that's the way other businesses are getting successful. And why can't an artist use it to their advantage as well? And we see that with so many artists getting big off social media, being discovered. Think about Justin Bieber was discovered on YouTube.
YouTube. Yeah.
And I mean, it's a 1 in a million chance, but sometimes you don't need to be that 1 in a million. You can be that, you don't have to be the millionaire, quadrillionaire that's making, doing 1,000 shows a year. You have enough to be comfortable. And if you really work hard, it will happen at some point. You'll gain some level, maybe not the same level that you're looking to achieve, but you will achieve some level of success, right? If I make
Mm,
music every day, I promote it every day, somebody's gonna listen to it eventually, right?
right.
And if for like for you, you go out, you promote your, let's just say, your manga, right? You promote
Mm,
it, you go to publishers. Eventually, somebody will pick it up.
yeah.
It's important. You should take a realistic approach, but never a pessimistic. It's okay to be. You should be optimistic about your future if you're working hard, but also be able to look outside of the artistic view and look at a more general, I guess, business minded view where you can look at things from an outside perspective and apply it more to the real world, right? Because art does
Mm,
prepare you always for the industry. Like if you go to art school, they're not just going to teach you about art, they have to teach you about the industry because that's important to all of it.
yeah. And especially for like modern art, right? We have sort of moved away from fine arts, where in order to like be successful in this age, you have to be able to market yourself. You have to make commercial art.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of like old artists like actually hate the concept of commercial art. They call it low art. But like in this age, you have to like market yourself in some way.
Yeah, and then it doesn't always have to be bad,
Hmm.
like it's all to achieve a goal, right? Sometimes it's like a means to an end, but it doesn't always have to be bad. It's only bad if you think of it that way, you
Yeah.
know. And that's a problem. There's two really for artists is two main extremes. There's one person who wants to elevate and pursue only the art, right? Who wants to
Hmm.
push a genre. For example, in music, you push a genre of music like I don't know, Herbie Hancock, right? One of the best jazz artists of all time, pushing the genre farther and farther for decades and decades. He's still alive. He's pushing it today, right?
Hmm.
But he's not making millions and millions of dollars. He's a legend amongst musicians and amongst a lot of people who enjoy music. Um, but he's not making that same amount. But he loves what he's doing, right?
Yeah, he's not Jay-Z.
Yeah,
But
I mean, Jay Z is a perfect representation of artistic integrity almost
mhm,
and business minded approach. Self made rapper billionaire
right.
came from nothing is now is now a billionaire. And it's just something you can aspire to. You might not reach that level, but
Mhm.
you just want to reach a level where you're comfortable and you're happy with what you have, right?
Yeah. And like for example, you can say like, hey, Kanye is pretty let's just say he's pretty batshit crazy, right?
Yeah, he's pretty
But
nuts.
like he's a really good businessman.
Yeah, of
I think that's
course.
just like the main difference between like modern artists and like the ones in the past. Because growing up, right, we hear of like the tragic story of Van Gogh
Yeah.
and like stuff like that. But like in this modern age, I don't think that's even really possible anymore, right?
I mean, you can do it, but you'll be living on. You won't be making money.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
I mean, you have to find a way to monetize. Like before, people could just. I mean, Van Gogh could do that because he was Van Gogh, and it was hundreds of years ago in the Renaissance era or whatever, right? And
Even then, right? The world is still like, even though like we say like we want to spread the language of like the heart, like that's why I feel like art is,
mm-hmm.
but still the world operates on money. Even for Van Gogh, his passion was supported by his brother, who was a businessman at
Yeah.
the time. So yeah, just like even though like what I said earlier, like you cannot make it big in art if you just wanted money, but money is still a very integral part of like art, especially nowadays.
Yeah, and any art form, like it's so important to be that because that allows what that does, it allows you to reach different forms and different
Mhm.
areas that you couldn't really reach. Well, you could, but it's a lot easier if people know who
Mhm.
you are. It does open up opportunities, right?
Yeah.
If I'm marketing myself online, promoting my post, my new single, my new album, my new piece of work, my new chapter
Mhm.
of my novel. Like if I work hard and I'm pushing all that, it it just it's just good in the long run, right?
Mhm.
And you have to have some sort of balance of both, right? Everything in
Mhm.
life is about balance, right? Yin and yang and whatever.
Mhm.
It's so important.
Yeah, because even if you like somehow you spend like 60 years creating the best piece of art ever, if
Yeah.
no one knows about it, it's pointless.
Yeah, I mean, it depends what your goal is, but
Mhm.
really it's like to most people, like if nobody knows what it is and you struggled your whole I mean, some people just do it for themselves, right? Like they
Right.
just want to create something for themselves. But like honestly for me, I don't want to
Mhm.
like be famous. Like that's not my goal doing music. I
Mhm.
just want to create music. And if I can make money off some of it, that's great. Like, it's amazing. And I mean, for you, maybe you have a different perspective on it, but um, like, what do you aspire to as an artist, as specifically in your field? Do you want to be on that level of these amazing illustrators and storytellers?
For me, like I wouldn't say that like for example, like I don't think I have the as much talent as those amazing illustrators. But for me, my goal is just to sort of like form connections with others and like really help people like walk out their like depressive states, right? Because that's what anime did for me, and that's why I'm really pursuing it. In a
Yeah,
way, like I'm pursuing the magic of it instead of like, oh, I want to be famous. Like
yeah.
being famous is great, but like that should never be the end goal or like just the goal of artists. I feel.
Yeah, and it's just a slippery slope,
Hmm.
because so few people like you can be successful depending on what your idea of success is,
Hmm.
but being famous is a different level. Like
Hmm.
it's just the chances of it happening are low. I mean, this is what everyone tells artists, like, oh, you won't make it and all that, but making it is different for everyone, right? Do you want to be a Johnny Depp? Do you want to be like open up a studio that produces the biggest anime in the world, right? Like
Hmm.
you want to be Studio Ghibli. Um,
Yeah,
I
no
mean,
one. Yeah, not everyone's gonna be a Hideaki Anno. No,
yeah,
not everyone's gonna
exactly.
make Evangelion.
Yeah,
But like, it really just depends on like what your goal is. Because in my opinion, like, um, the end of someone's like life is also supposed to be the purest desire of that person. But like everyone's definition of that is different. So like you just have to find it. But for me, like I don't really care about like I mean it'll be nice to be famous. It'll be nice to have money, but like you should never do art for that.
yeah, because it's honestly it'll be a disappointment when you don't achieve it, right?
Hmm.
Honestly, don't be. I don't want to be that person that says set your expectations low, but you have to also be realistic in some sense, right?
Hmm.
You as an artist you have to be more optimistic than most people, because think about it, if you're a doctor, if you're starting to become a doctor, you go to school for 10 years, there's a high likelihood if you get good marks and you study hard, there's a high likelihood that you'll get a residency based on the market, right? and you'll become a doctor that practices in whatever specific field. Same thing with a lawyer. As long as if you work hard, you'll achieve, right? That's why people
Mhm.
choose those. That's why a lot of people choose those occupations because it's safe. Not necessarily that they're happy, you know. Like my dad,
Yeah.
I he's definitely happy. He's always wanted to be a lawyer as a kid,
Mhm.
and he achieved his dream. But he doesn't just do that. As a business runs in our family, like my grandfather, he owns a gas station, and he owns two gas stations, and he's always been in that business for a long time, and that's just been in our family. Even my mom's side of the family, they've always been in business as immigrants. That's a lot of people look to that as a way to make money without having to rely on anyone else except yourself and your family.
Mhm.
And my dad, he does a few other things as well, and it's like it helps feed his passion too. Like he has a different definition. He may not be on the same wavelength as me, but he has his own passions, right?
Mhm.
And he does, and that's his happiness. Like he's happy, he has his family, us, right? His
Mhm.
brothers, his sister, and that's what it's really about. Like he always
Right.
tells me, I'm glad my family always taught me this, even though I grew up having a great life. And I lived in I wouldn't say I lived in excess, but I lived with more than enough to survive,
Mhm.
right? Lived in a
Yeah.
nice house, always had food on the table, always had clothes on my back. But my parents, I'm lucky, they never taught me to be, I guess, to take those for granted because they didn't have that growing up. And
Mhm.
I always want to channel that mindset, because those you always see those people that are the most successful are the ones who started with nothing. And sometimes it's almost like you have sometimes maybe thinking you have something, right? You always have something to go back on is almost like a crutch to lean on
Mhm.
that's preventing you from running towards your dream, right? To be
Mhm.
successful. So I feel like you have to do other things. Like we're lucky, both of us were lucky enough to have support, and from our parents. Like a lot of people didn't really have, don't have that.
Mhm.
But yeah, I feel that we need to push ourselves and try to get ourselves in a humble state, right? Artists get humbled a lot, or they are actually, some get humbled, and some
Mhm.
feed to their own ego. That's why I think it's important to have discipline in some sense, where you're always checking yourself, right?
Yeah.
Because instead of life checking us, like, oh, you got to pay bills, so you can't do this, you can't be lazy here because you don't have any money. You're gonna have this one thing every single day because the cheapest, that's all we can afford. You have to do it in other ways, like, okay, I'm gonna wake up every day and I'm gonna work on this project. Like I'm gonna
Mhm.
force, no matter what, no matter if I feel like, I mean, art is a little different than working on other things, but still getting in that mindset, even for me, like when it comes to creating art, I find that instead of having it spur on me, like in the spur of the moment, just comes to me. I think putting myself in a state where like I'm here, I'm gonna think of doing it. Like this is my time to focus on my art, creating music.
Mhm.
I find I do a lot better and more consistent at creating things I actually enjoy versus just trying to like, wait for it to come to me. Sometimes it'll happen, but also
Mhm.
having that time, where you're going to be working on it and
Mhm.
working on your craft is also good. I find it creates discipline and helps you get to, I guess, at least for me, a more creative state. I don't know about for you.
Right. Mhm. Yeah, certainly. But yeah. Mhm. And actually, going off like earlier, we talked about fame, right? So and like setting like somewhat low expectations when you're starting out. I actually struggled with that for the longest time as well, especially even like now recently, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I like friends that are very successful, like on social media, especially for example, like within like 2-ish years, they already have around like 1,200 no 12,000 followers on Twitter
Yeah.
for their arts. Like and like for me, like when I do something that I spend a lot of time on, I only really get returns of like if I'm lucky 50 likes, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's pretty hard. That just one thing that comes with it, I guess. Um, I think I'm very ashamed to admit this, but like it is a part of like what happened to me at least. I do get jealous a lot, especially when you see like your friends, like your peers, like succeed so much, and you're being stuck in one place. Have you experienced things like that? Well,
Yeah, I
you're
feel like
relatively new to.
yeah, I feel like we all as anyone, we all have, you know, times where we feel jealous and
Mhm,
because we work sometimes we feel like we work so hard and we don't achieve what we want.
mhm,
But I feel like the more constructive, trying our best to be constructive with that, instead of like being happy for someone else
mhm.
is in the end at the end of the day is good for yourself, right?
Yeah.
Like for example, there's people like I've met at my school who are successful in music, like
Mhm,
in the sense that they get lots of views on their music, lots of streams, and I'm happy for them. Like I haven't known them that long, but I'm glad that they're doing well. And I feel like at first I felt that way. Like, man, I wish I could get to that level. I wish I was at this point. I wish I had what they had, right?
mhm,
But that mentality is so draining, like to think like that all the time.
mhm.
And I mean, the best thing is just what I like to do. Honestly, I just ask um, what they do,
Mhm.
and I try to gain some knowledge from them and see. Not trying to like, oh, let me see what they do. Let me just copy it, and then I'll become successful, and then I can rule the world, right? And then I finally be able to be better than them.
Mhm.
Sometimes it becomes that, but I want to go there and learn. Like if you really want, like that's the best way is looking at people who've already become successful on whatever type of success that is
Mhm.
in a field that you want to be in. Going there and asking them is one of the best things you can do because knowledge is power, and it allows you to push yourself forward through something. Like if like, okay, this person, it might not work for you, but I find it makes me feel better if I, go ask them, okay, so what did you do to do this? Sometimes you got lucky, right? Even a lot of people admit that too. Sometimes they got like for example, maybe your friend, somebody got reposted. I'm not saying their art is, like
Mhm.
not up to par or whatever, but somebody reposted the art on a big page, and then they started reposting it, retweeting it, and then that's where it happened, right?
Mhm.
And I honestly believe that if you working hard creates those, it increases the likelihood of those chances.
Mhm.
No one who doesn't like work hard on something, um, like there's no way that they're not gonna achieve some level of increased success. It's going to
Mhm.
happen. Like it may not be guaranteed at that same level, right? But
Right.
if I work hard, the more opportunities I'll get, the more chances I will get,
Mhm.
right? And you look at your artist friend, and you see his success or her success, that they've reached this level. One thing I would just suggest is try your best. This is best even just for your mental health, right? Just try your best to be happy for them.
Mhm.
Be happy for them, and try to figure out some way, or try to ask them maybe for some advice or anything. Like try to almost humble yourself and go to someone
Yeah.
for help.
And one thing you mentioned earlier about like just copying like someone so like you can be successful, I think yeah, that's a very very flawed concept. Because like especially for art, right? I think the main thing that makes your art unique is your individuality. So that's one thing I learned. Never lose it. That's like instead of like if you copy someone else, that's not a one-way street to success. That's a one-way street to eventual failure.
Exactly. Like what artist have you seen event that has gained success from copying somebody else's work, or I mean, there's always inspiration, right? And there's no such thing. I guess they always say there's no such thing as an original idea, but
Hmm.
like in a way, when I was saying to go to them and ask them what they're doing, it's I would agree that it's it's very important to keep your individuality, but
Hmm.
s- ask for advice on things that where you're not invested. Like for
Hmm.
example, maybe that person is more regular with their posting, or there's
Hmm.
something about them that is making them being seen more, and just in that, I guess, sort of business mindset of seeing, well, what is your like they're not your competition, but what are other people in your industry doing in the same spaces you're doing, and why are they becoming successful, right? Because
Right.
your arts as an artist, when something you produce is good, right?
Hmm.
Because so many times, like, this is garbage, like this feels horrible, like it just doesn't feel right. When your
Hmm.
product is good.
Yeah.
And then the in between, getting the product to your consumer, to your audience, is the hard part. It's not it's
Hmm.
not it's not the only hard part. Making the art is difficult as well, but it's the next hard part, basically.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
yeah.
But yeah. Just going back to like individuality thing, just like again, for me, I feel like if you're like we have a very famous artist here in Toronto called Sakimi Chen, right?
Hmm.
She has so many clones that basically copy her art style, but like in the end, like if you copied her art style and you're forever known as like a Sakimi Chen clone, you're not gonna feel fulfillment.
Exactly. It's short term. Everyone thinks about the short term, right?
Mhm.
um and in the long term, you're gonna see that you're and you're not gonna be proud of it. You
Mhm.
may gain success because, oh, look, this is very similar to what I see, but people don't like that. you know Inspiration versus straight out copying is really like a problem. Like in the music industry, you hear about, like, somebody was sued for, oh, you played this chord in this order, right? Like, or Dark Horse and this other, like, dubstep song or whatever. It was like
Mhm.
that Katy Perry song got sued. They got sued and they won. That guy who sued Katy Perry won the case for that melody. It was like, it was very interesting in terms of, like, a legal aspect, where's a fine line. But the problem is, there's only a finite amount of notes, right?
Mhm.
There's only a finite amount of sounds you can make. So you cannot claim ownership of an order of them, right?
Mhm.
Because if you did that, then if somebody claimed ownership of the four chords that are played in every pop song, then one person would own every single song on the radio.
Mhm.
And the difference is getting inspiration from people. Like for me, when I'm in a rut with creating music, I try to listen, to as much music as possible, and I
Mhm.
try to make it a more. I actually got out of listening to. I used to listen to a lot of music at nighttime, and really, really dive deep into it. Just trying to listen to every small, especially now as I'm producing versus just composing. Um,
Mhm.
I really try to listen to the intricacies of how it's being done, not just how it sounds, but like all the
Mhm.
small details. Oh, when do the hi hats go louder here? Are they in the right side of the ear, the left side of the ear? Where's the percussion? The rest of percussion? Where's the piano? Where's the vocals? And I use those, like, things to inspire me to create new ideas, right?
Mhm.
And I think that's one of the um, most beautiful thing about art is seeing someone else's work and developed, and somebody taking their own spin on it.
Mhm.
Not as a remix, but just some sort of inspiration. I find that as an artist, somebody you see somebody do that to your art, I find that it's just one of the best feelings. Very flattering. Like they were so inspired from what you produced that
Mhm.
they created something that was their own from an idea that they got from your art.
Yeah, because plagiarism is the best sort of flattery in a way, right?
Yeah, and so in a way, yeah, for sure.
In a way.
You wouldn't
But
copy
yeah.
something that's bad.
But yeah, I think my one of my favorite art teachers said once, like, art is also about stealing. You steal from what's good and make it yours.
Exactly. Like that's just a plain way to put it. Like even I was talking about, look at other people in the industry. You're essentially doing the same thing. You admire them because they've become successful and they're doing a similar thing to you, and you try
Mhm.
to emulate what they're doing to maybe achieve more success or a different goal that you're looking to achieve based with the same methods, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. So I think that's actually all the time we have right now. We've hit
Mhm.
about just over an hour.
Great.
So yeah, thank you for listening to the podcast. Whoever is listening, um, the Way podcast will be releasing every Sunday, unless stated otherwise. Make sure to follow us on Instagram at the.way podcast. Um, and check out our website. On there, I'll be writing. If you're listening to this, there'll already be an introduction of our guests that have come on,
Mhm.
and you can see more updates on where you can listen to the podcast, where else you can follow us on there. And yeah, Charles, you can plug anything else you want.
Yeah. So I'm actually in a art block right now. So if you want to check out my previous art, check out me. Check out what I have on Isaboshi on both Instagram and Twitter. But yeah, that's it. Thanks for being on, Sojin. It's been an honor.
No problem, man. And thank you for everyone who's listening. See you guys next week.